Hello everyone. This is the 18th part of the story, Blade God of Blood, Chapter 35. Is this a mistake? When the acquisition of the Oscorp is so important, you go to the casino to get away? Can you even feel a little sense of responsibility? The Green Goblin yelled. The distance between Las Vegas and New York is quite far, and it would take several hours to take a plane. With his current situation, it is impossible to go. The depressed Green Goblin could only deal with the others first. He put on the biochemical armor and the Green Goblin mask, and went to attack the experimental base of the rival aerospace company, taking their humanoid armor, the high-level officials, and all the Ministry of Defense officials. In doing so, on the one hand, he retaliated against competitors and the Ministry of Defense, and on the other hand, it delays their signing time, so that when they take back the Oscorp, they can re-sign. The process went very smoothly. The only thing that bothered the Green Goblin was that General Slocum didn't come this time because of the last fright and escaped. After blowing up the opponent's experimental base, the Green Goblin began to attack the company's directors. On the one hand, it was revenge. As a result, the murder rate in New York skyrocketed, and Police Chief George Stacy ordered the police to patrol all day long to catch the elusive criminal. The cops didn't encounter the flying Green Goblin, but one did, and that was Spider-Man swinging in the sky. Spider-Man was lying on the wall of the building, shouting to the Green Goblin, "You just killed someone, don't run!" "You!" The Green Goblin smiled disdainfully, and the glider under his feet stretched out two barrels and quickly shot at Spider-Man. Spider-Man was startled, hurriedly raised his hand and shot a spider web that stuck to the opposite building, and then swung his feet out with force. The bullet hit a large piece of glass behind, and the glass shattered and fell, scaring the pedestrians. "Throwing objects from heights is against the law." Spider-Man jumped on the wall of the building and rushed towards the Green Goblin. Green Goblin controlled the glider to avoid it. Who knew that the bottom of the glider was stuck by two groups of the spider web? Spider-Man swung hard in the air, his legs moving to kick the Green Goblin. Green Goblin jumped into the glider to avoid Spider-Man's attack, then raised his hand and threw two high-tech throwing knives at Spider-Man that would automatically attack. The flying knife first cut the spider web, and then spun vigorously to slash at Spider-Man. Spider-Man was frightened and evaded again and again, and shouted, "What the hell is this?" Green Goblin took the opportunity to control the glider to catch him. He wanted to kill Spider-Man here, but he heard the sound of a siren from below. Green Goblin scolded and decided to leave here first. Spider-Man got rid of the two flying knives and then used the spider web to move at high speed between the buildings, chasing after Green Goblin. After the police below found the target, they also began to chase the Green Goblin in the sky. When Green Goblin saw this, he grinned and controlled the glider to launch missiles. With a bang, the police car was blown into the air, and then slammed into the coffee shop. It rolled a few times, and several unfortunate pedestrians were smashed and flew out together with the tables and chairs. This is not over, there is another bang, the police car exploded, the shock wave overturns the surrounding tables, chairs, and people, and flames spread rapidly. Spider-Man was shocked. He didn't care about chasing the Green Goblin, and hurried down to save people. Unfortunately, although he tried his best, in the end, several people died and more than 10 people were injured. This incident was quickly published in the newspapers. Not only they blamed the police, but Spider-Man also received a lot of criticism. The Daily Bugle pointed out that if Spider-Man hadn't chased the Green Goblin, so many people would not have died. The Green Goblin used by the Daily Bugle has officially become Norman's nickname. The criticized Spider-Man was so disappointed that he was punched several times by Trish during the night's sparring. Trish asked inexplicably, "What's going on today, being so listless?" Peter already knew about Trish's dreams, and he asked, "Trish, do you think Spider-Man did something wrong today?" Trish said with certainty, "Of course not, it's the Green Goblin who is wrong. He is so cruel, if we don't catch him as soon as possible, I don't know how many people will die in the future." Peter was still a little guilty. he said. The Green Goblin was indeed very ferocious, but if Spider-Man hadn't chased him, so many people wouldn't have died today. According to you, is it wrong for the police to chase criminals? Trish sneered and said, You go through the past cases, there are many such things. The police are right, Spider-Man is even more right. Well, don't waste time, let's continue training. I want to become a superhero as soon as possible, catch the criminals. Peter hurriedly put on a posture, but he secretly made up his mind that he must catch the Green Goblin and bring him to justice. In Las Vegas, Bert couldn't help but shake his head when he saw the news reports in New York. The first well-known supervillain has born. What's going on these days? Why are there so many messes popping up? First Iron Man, then Spider-Man, and now a Green Goblin? Frank shook his head. He finally began to perform his official duties, a personal bodyguard. There are superheroes, and naturally there are supervillains. Bert smiled and said, Frank, you have to hurry up and learn to absorb elixir. I don't want to see you have an accident. Mercury's snowman, and you practiced at the same time, they have already learned it. That thing is too difficult to practice. Besides, even if I don't practice chi, I won't have an accident. I'm Frank Castle, the best Special Forces soldier. Frank said proudly. Bert glanced at the thermos cup in his hand and complained. A special soldier who holds a thermos cup everywhere he goes. I say, you are a strong Westerner who drinks hot water, but you even add wolfberry into it. Who taught you this? What's wrong with drinking hot water? Who says we can only drink ice water? Frank said angrily. As for the wolfberry, it was taught by Snowman, and he said it can maintain health. Need to maintain health, it means that your physical strength has begun to decline. Bert said, Frank, after cultivating chi, your body will always maintain its peak state, which is not only good for battle, but also makes you and Maria happier, and even can have a third child. Frank's eyes lit up. This function? I didn't read about it, so don't lie to me. Bert said, If you practice chi, I guarantee you can still have children at the age of 80. The two were talking when Natasha walked in with the phone and said, Blood God, Director Fury is on phone. Tell him that I'm on vacation and I'm not free. Bert knew that Fury wanted to ask about the Green Goblin, but ignored him. Natasha nodded, took the phone out, and came back after a while. This time it was Carter's call. Bert motioned Natasha to leave, and then answered the call. Carter said a little dissatisfiedly, Why did you tell Tony about Howard? Ms. Carter, who is Tony Stark? Bert asked Carter, who asked, What do you mean? Tony Stark is not a nephew who needs your care. He is the chairman of Stark Industries, the Iron Man who defends world peace, and a superhero worshipped by countless people. Bert said, He is qualified and capable of investigating the murder of his parents. Also, S.H.I.E.L.D. has begun to win over him. Do you want him to follow in his father's footsteps? Carter hesitated. This? Bert said, Ms. Carter, he will be your good helper because he can never be from there. I think you should tell him everything. Let me consider it. Carter was a little shaken. She asked, Why did you go to the casino at this time? What is the situation with that Green Goblin? Bert said, How do I know? As for me coming to the casino, I want to buy something, and the seller asked me to come here to deal. Carter said, Don't you know? Those who died are all directors of the Oscorp. Blood God, are you killing people with others? Ms. Carter, you are familiar with me. If you talk nonsense like this, I will sue you for slander. Bert smiled and said, I will go back in a few days. At that time, the Oscorp will officially become our property. Carter didn't pursue it any further. She said, It's already very difficult for me to manage a Blood God group. You need to find someone else to manage the Oscorp. I'm going to let Mercury take over the Oscorp. She is now familiar with the details of the Oscorp. After finishing talking, Bert hung up the phone. Did he use others to kill? Of course, the Oscorp will be his own group, and he doesn't need others to point fingers at him. Bert prepared the funds for so long, not just to be an ordinary major shareholder. Frank said. You look like the evil capitalist in the movie. How can a capitalist not be evil? Behind the bright and beautiful, everyone is full of filth. Bert shrugged and said, I don't know when the seller sent a message. Let's go out and play first. For me, the casino is paradise. Not only can we have fun, but we can also make money. Frank asked inexplicably, What are you going to buy, and why did you come to the casino on purpose? Buy a gram of special metal worth $10,000. Bert smiled and said, Only that seller in the world has the goods on hand, so I can only accommodate him. Frank was surprised. $10,000 for a gram? This is much more expensive than gold. Its value is not comparable to gold. Bert said, The seller is very cautious. I still use the vampire channel to get him to agree to trade with me. In the dark world, the vampire's signboard is very useful. Frank asked. So, does he know who you are? Yup. Bert nodded. At this moment, a very old mobile phone rang in his arms. After he took it out to answer it, he nodded and said, Okay, I'll go over right away. Then, Bert put down the phone and said to Frank, Frank, get ready to go. Let someone bring the guys with you. Don't get excited. It's not for a fight, it's for the other party to see. If we look weak, the other party's mind will give birth to bad thoughts. No wonder you asked me to bring so many people. Frank understood. He got up and went out to prepare, and soon, a convoy left the hotel and headed for an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. In the abandoned warehouse, Bert just got out of the car, a bearded man with a tattoo on his face, who knew it was not a good thing at a glance, greeted him with a big smile. Blood God, I have long admired the name. In addition to this man, there are more than a dozen well-armed strong men in the warehouse, and their auras are sturdy and cruel, just like pirates. They also make occasional cameos as pirates. Mr. Clow, nice to meet you. Bert stepped forward to shake hands with Ulysses Clow, and a drop of blood silently sneaked into the other person's body. Then, he let go of his hand and said, Mr. Clow, where are the goods? Ulysses didn't find any problem at all. He smiled and said, Blood God, you are really in a hurry. Please, I brought all the 10 kilograms of vibranium you want. Bert followed Ulysses forward and said at the same time, 10 kilograms of vibranium, hundreds of millions of dollars, Mr. Clow, have you made a lot of money these years? Ulysses shook his head. I earn more, spend more, and besides, my amount of vibranium is nothing. Bert said, That's right, there is someone who owns a mountain of vibranium. I've never dared to say that I'm the richest man because no other person has that money. Ulysses was taken aback, and he asked, Do you know the inside story of that place? The longer you live, the more you know. Bert smiled and said, However, no one will believe it if you say it. Who would have imagined that a country with stronger technology than the United States would pretend to be a super poor country that wants relief from the council? Yeah, no one will believe it. Ulysses sighed. I always felt that even the United States could not beat that country. Bert said, This is not necessarily the case. That country has been pretending and has not fought any wars. If they fight, they may not be opponents. Wars still have to be fought by people. Technology is only one aspect. Bert and Ulysses were happy to talk, but Natasha and Frank behind them were dumbfounded. Frank couldn't help but ask, Bert, which country are you talking about? Stronger than America? Bert turned back and said to Ulysses deeply, There is no need to say because no one will believe it. Bert said, Speaking of which, if it wasn't for the lack of evidence, I wanted to tell S.H.I.E.L.D. about this. Those guys all have persecution paranoia. If they knew there was such a country, they would have trouble sleeping, and even be scared. It's possible. Ulysses laughed, and Natasha frowned. Are these two guys joking or serious? If it's true, Director Fury won't be scared, but he probably won't want to sleep anymore. Last time, the Ancient One matter made him sleepless for a month. Natasha thought to herself. Fortunately, the director is already bald, so he doesn't have to worry about hair loss. Chapter 36. Soon Ulysses and Bert came in front of a large container. Ulysses motioned for his men to open the container, but it was empty. Facing Bert's dissatisfied gaze, Ulysses clapped his hands, and the two men walked into the container and pulled down the steel cabinet wall inside. Behind it was a row of neatly stacked transparent jars, and inside the jars, purplish-blue vibranium. Ulysses picked up a jar and threw it to Bert, and said, 10 kilograms, you can check it. Very good. Bert took the jar and glanced at it, nodding in satisfaction. Then he turned around and threw the jar to Frank, saying, This is vibranium worth $10,000 per gram, the hardest metal in the world, the one on Captain America's hand. The iconic shield was made of this. Frank caught the jar and asked curiously, The hardest metal? Bert, what are you buying this for? To build a weapon that suits me. Now there are steel armors flying everywhere in the sky. It's a loss without a weapon, Bert replied. He originally planned to build a dragon tooth sword, using the dragon skeleton underground. He has the dragon tooth, but not the technology to make it a weapon, so he can only use vibranium. Frank looked at the vibranium in the jar and sighed. Hundreds of millions of dollars for a weapon, you rich people know how to play. Bert smiled and said, What's so strange about this? The captain's shield is worth at least 50 million. Doesn't he still play with it? So the shield in the hands of Captain America is so valuable? Frank was stunned. More than 50 million? It turned out that the enemies of the captain were killed by money. Bert said, It's so valuable. I've always wondered why no one picked up Captain America's shield and ran away. Probably because it can't be sold. Ulysses smiled and said, Blood God, the thing is here, you should pay the bill, $100 million. Natalie! Bert snapped his fingers. Natalie came up with the laptop, and Bert said, I thought you would let me use cash. We also keep pace with the times. And the money in the bank is much easier to launder than cash. Ulysses smiled and said. Soon, his cell phone rang, and the $100 million arrived. Ulysses was overjoyed, and he shook hands with Bert. Blood God, it's a pleasure to work with you. Next time you need it, you can continue to contact me. Don't worry, I will definitely contact you. Bert smiled and motioned to Frank to take someone to move the vibranium. Next time. Sorry, no next time. The business went well, and Ulysses was very happy. He said, Unfortunately, I'm used to leaving immediately after finishing my business, otherwise I'd like to have a drink with you and make a big gamble. Ulysses sold vibranium for more than 10 years. Why is he still so poor? It's very simple, he likes to gamble. This is a common problem of many people who are swindlers. The money comes too fast, and it is used quickly. Bert said casually, You can drink, but you don't have to gamble. Tony Stark can't beat me even if he cheats. If you say that, I want to bet with you even more. Do you think it's strange? When Ulysses heard this, he immediately became interested. He said, Next time I'll bring gambling equipment, let's take a good gamble. I guess I can save a lot of money next time. Well, Mr. Clow, see you next time. Bert smiled, and when Frank and the others finished moving the vibranium, he waved his hand and drove away with everyone. Come on, let's go back. When Bert and the others left completely, Ulysses immediately led people to retreat. He was very careful in doing business, otherwise, he would not be alive now. Vibranium, who doesn't get jealous? By car, by plane, by boat, Ulysses spent most of the day returning to his home, the Churchill, where most of his vibranium was hidden. It's finally time to relax. Celebrate tonight. Ulysses breathed a sigh of relief. He was so happy that he didn't know that a super small thief was brought here by him. In the dead of night, the thief woke up and flew out of Ulysses' body. He was the drop of blood that Bert had put into Ulysses' body before. Immediately afterward, this drop of blood changed, and turned into Bert in an Ant-Man's suit. Bert nodded with satisfaction. Compared to before, his sensing ability is much stronger. After all, He has been absorbing blood and elixir for the past few months. Also, don't underestimate this drop of blood, it's actually 1/3 of Bert's blood, so even if it's so far away, Bert can still vaguely sense it, and then follow the sense to transfer his consciousness, to come over. As for the other 2/3 of Bert's body, it has fallen into a deep sleep, and only some instincts are left. In this regard, Bert has not made a breakthrough yet. Without wasting time, Bert flew up and searched for vibranium on the boat. Flying was not the ability of the Ant-Man suit, but his ability. After a while, Bert found the vibranium hidden in the mezzanine of the cargo compartment. He first destroyed the surveillance, and then used PIM particles to shrink hundreds of kilograms of vibranium into his pocket. After doing this, Bert did not leave immediately, because it was too easy to arouse suspicion. He used the Purple Man virus to quietly control Ulysses' men, and then let them launch a rebellion. Ulysses was caught off guard. In the end, after Bert's release, he took a few cronies and fled Churchill in a speedboat. He swore that he would kill all of these rebels. Ulysses didn't know that not long after he left, all the rebels committed suicide, and even the big ship was sunk to the bottom by Bert. The plan is not perfect, but how can crime be perfect? As long as people don't know about PIM particles, what does it matter if they suspect vampires? After doing this, Bert returned to the casino. His flying speed was extremely fast, and before dawn, he merged with the rest of his body. It's done! I accidentally made another billion! Bert sat up from the bed and nodded with satisfaction. At this moment, he smiled and said, "S.H.I.E.L.D. is about to start looking for trouble with Ulysses? After all, I put such a big deal on it." This is also the reason why Bert didn't kill Ulysses. It's not that he couldn't, but it was useful to keep him. S.H.I.E.L.D. did start looking for Ulysses. After Natasha passed the news back, Director Fury knew after a little thought that they were talking about Wakanda. Because of vibranium, only Wakanda produced it. To be honest, Director Fury doesn't believe that Wakanda is that strong. After all, why should a country so powerful be hidden? It is also hidden as a super-poor country that wants relief from the council. Have they been kicked in the head by a donkey? However, as a senior victim of paranoia, since he has obtained the information, he must check it out. While Director Fury sent someone to investigate Wakanda secretly, he asked Hawkeye to lead someone to arrest Ulysses and bring some vibranium back to supplement the base. Recently, the cost of materials has increased, and the construction cost of the base has increased a lot. There is no doubt that Hawkeye is the top agent. The problem is that after Ulysses was betrayed by his subordinates, he found a place to hide for fear of being hunted down. In this case, a hiding mouse is not so easy to find, even if he has eagle eyes. When Bert was happy in the casino, Norman Osborn was not doing well at all, because Spider-Man had been pestering him, preventing him from killing those shareholders. The two sides fought several times, and neither could win the other. To make matters worse, the loss caused by the Green Goblin made the city government unbearable. They asked Iron Man to take action. The Green Goblin was very afraid of Iron Man, and dared not move out easily. Norman, who was pretending to be a patient in his bedroom, thought about it, called Nels, and asked, "How is the team training? It can come in handy." However, they were only homeless people at first. Even if they were strengthened, their combat effectiveness would not be much higher. Nels replied, "And we don't have any more gliders and goblin suits." "It doesn't matter, use the gun if you don't have a glider, you make them ready, we'll do it as soon as Bert comes back." Norman put down the phone. At this time, the TV started to broadcast the press conference of the Oscorp. Vice President McCann happily announced to the reporter, "Mr. Max has agreed to rejoin the Oscorp, and he will be the Power Department's new supervisor." "McCann, Max!" Norman's face instantly turned hideous. He decided he was going to kill these two guys. In the Oscorp, McCann sat in the vice president's office with a smug look on his face. The Blood God trusted him very much and let him be in charge of the Oscorp. With his efforts, the stock price of Oscorp gradually returned to stability. It won't be long before I move into the president's office. Norman, you can go in peace. I will carry forward the Oscorp. McCann thought proudly. At this moment, the glass wall behind him suddenly shattered, and he fell off the chair in fright and fell into the glass slag all over the floor. Immediately afterward, a green figure flew in from outside and shouted at McCann. "McCann, you traitor!" When McCann heard this voice, he shouted in shock. "Norman!" "Yes, it's me." Norman laughed horribly. He jumped out of the glider, lifted McCann from the ground, grabbed him, and walked to the window where the wind was howling, shouting, "The Oscorp is mine, always mine!" "Norman, no, Norman, ah!" McCann hurriedly begged for mercy, but Norman showed no mercy and threw him from the 40th floor. "What a wonderful sound!" Hearing McCann's screams, Norman laughed. Then, he walked back and turned on McCann's computer. He quickly tapped the keyboard. The monitoring of the power department soon appeared on the computer. He saw that Max was bringing people to patrol the grid in genetic labs. Max, who was sloppy and wretched before, now looks well-dressed and looks like a successful person. "You are also a traitor!" Norman started typing on the keyboard again. Max was touching the instrument with his hand, and the instrument suddenly leaked electricity. He was twitched by the electricity, and then accidentally fell from the railing and fell into the pond where the genetic eel was raised. The pool was fully charged, and Max was screaming in agony. What's worse, the genetic eels swam over to bite Max when they saw that someone had violated their territory. In this way, Max died tragically. "Die, traitor!" Norman laughed, jumped on the glider, and quickly got out of there. Because of the successive deaths of McCann and Max, the Oscorp building was in chaos. A female assistant sneaked into the chairman's office while the security guards left, and then took out a special USB flash drive, intending to steal company information. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded at the door. "Who are you, and why are you here?" The female assistant was startled and hurriedly raised her head to find that it was the future chairman's assistant, Mercury. She put away the USB flash drive and said, "Hello, I'm here to clean up." Mercury asked suspiciously, "Why don't I see any tools for cleaning?" The female assistant walked towards Mercury and said nervously, "The tools are outside. I'll wipe the table and computer with a tissue first." When the female assistant walked in front of Mercury, she suddenly raised her left hand with force, and the bracelet on it came out and smashed toward Mercury. At the same time, her right hand turned into a knife and slashed toward Mercury's neck. The female assistant didn't intend to kill Mercury, she just wanted to stun her, but to her surprise, her wrist was grabbed by the other party. Before she could understand why the other party was so quick, there was severe pain in her abdomen. The whole person flew out and hit the wall and fell. The female assistant curled up like a shrimp in pain, and she was full of shock. How could the other party be so strong? It turned out to be a little thief cat. Mercury stepped on high heels and walked to the female assistant. The female assistant, who was still in pain, suddenly put her hands on the ground and swept her legs towards Mercury's calf. Mercury snorted coldly, jumped high, and then kicked the female assistant's chin with a volley, and the female assistant flew up and fell unconscious on the spot. "She is really easy to use, and even the sense of power has been enhanced." Mercury fell to the ground, looking at the female assistant who was also on the ground, and smiled coldly. Then, she took out the phone and called Bert to tell him what had just happened, including the deaths of McCann and Max. "You take charge of the overall situation first, and I will come back immediately," Bert said, however, not for the Green Goblin, but for Max. To be honest, Bert was very speechless. Max still became the Electro. This fate is too amazing, right? At night, in a morgue in New York, the electric lights suddenly started to turn on and off, which was very scary. What was even more horrifying was that the corpse in the morgue suddenly moved and fell to the ground by accident. The lights are all bursting with sparks. The charred corpse on the ground looked very flustered and kept moving. At this time, he saw his palm and became even more panicked, because his palm was transparent, and he could see the blood vessels, bones, and electric currents inside. That's right, the current. This corpse has electricity, and as he moves, the surrounding electrical appliances are directly activated, and an electric cutter even spins violently and falls from the cabinet, almost hitting the corpse. What's wrong with me? The corpse was extremely panicked. He stood up, and the scorched shell on his body gradually shattered and fell, revealing his true appearance. Max grabbed a cloak and fled the morgue in a panic. On the street, he felt very hungry and couldn't help but absorb the current from the car next to him. Max didn't feel enough. He followed the direction of the wires on the ground, all the way to the place where the current was most concentrated. He could see the current. The place where the current is most concentrated is Duffy Square. Max found a node, dug up the cover, grabbed the wire with both hands, and absorbed the current like crazy. This marks the end of part 18 of the story, Blade God of Blood. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.